All right.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, to today's Marketing Research and Strategy webinar. We've got a great lineup of panelists that are eager to share some of their best marketing secrets in order to help you continue to plan and grow your business. I'm 𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗀, the Director of Client Experience here at Keystone Click. And more importantly, I will be your facilitator for today's panel discussion. We have a number of phenomenal questions outlined that we will be asking our panelists. They will go through a little portion where they're actually going to ask each other some questions, which is always incredibly insightful. And then we'll polish off today's webinar with some Q&A for those in attendance. If you have a question, please do use the chat or the Q&A feature to submit your question. I'll make sure I go through those and we get everyone's questions answered. We will review all those questions at a designated time during our panel discussion. So let's go ahead and get started and meet our panelists. 𝗘𝗅𝗽 Weston. 𝗘𝗅𝗽 is president of Sutherland Weston Marketing Communications based in Bangor, Maine. He is a fan of practical solutions and believes the world could benefit from some more old-fashioned and a little less bright and shiny. 𝗘𝗅𝗽, welcome to today's discussion.
Hey, thanks, Will. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Apparently, Stephen King is from Bangor, Maine. That's a little trivia question to get us started here today. Have you had any run-ins with Stephen King?
Yeah, he is from Bangor, and yes, of course, it's a small town, and so if you're from Bangor and you grew up here, you've had run-ins with Steve. I don't know if we have time for a quick story, but I just want to share. He's a real laid-back guy. I worked in a pizza shop, and he left very, very excited one night because he was, after talking with us, he went up and compared his 𝗏𝗶𝗶𝗍 ticket, which is our local lottery. He got 3 numbers right, which is a free ticket, and you would have thought he won the whole thing. He was extremely, extremely happy. But his son Joe is also a writer, known as Joe Hill at writing, but Joe King growing up. And to let you know how small the town was, I have recollections of an 8th grade sleepover for a birthday party where we played Dungeons and Dragons, and Joe was our dungeon master. And if you can think of any better scenario than to have Stephen King's son being your Dungeons and Dragons dungeon master, that was pretty awesome.
That is fantastic. Awesome. Yeah, definitely always have time for a little story there. Next up, we have Jordan Meyer. Jordan is the founder and CEO of Granular. He has managed digital marketing for over 150 companies, ranging from startups to Fortune 50 companies throughout the United States, Canada, South America, and the UK as well. Jordan, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, guys. Happy to be here.
Any famous people from your hometown?
Absolutely not.
Jordan.
Jordan is the famous person. That's awesome. Great. Well, let's keep moving. Another panelist today is 𝗷𝗄𝗏𝗍𝗏. Howard is the owner of 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 Branding and Creative. He has a decades-long career of building brands, building client businesses, building client trust, and building agencies. Originally from Milwaukee to Atlanta to Chicago, from regional brands to national brands. Howard's developed creative strategies, corresponding campaigns, and integrated them across all media. Howard, thanks for joining us.
I'm happy to join you all, and hopefully there'll be a few nuggets of value somebody can take away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And lastly, bringing up the pack, 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. Lori is the president of Keystone Click, which is a strategic digital marketing agency serving B2B industrial manufacturers and professional service organizations across the U.S. Lori, welcome to you as well.
Well, thank you for everyone joining us today. I'm excited to share some awesome insights, and thanks, Will, for leading the way here for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell you what, let's go ahead and get into the nit and gritty of things. Jordan, we're going to kind of start you off in the hot seat right away. My first question for you is, how can you tell if my potential customers are out there on Google or if they're on other digital platforms?
Sure. So there are some tips and tricks, but honestly, the easiest way is to just do a search. If you go out into Google or Bing, do a search for your product or your service, you're going to see ads most likely. If you don't, that's a good opportunity to be a early adopter, but Google actually shows the number of ads based on the amount of demand for a product or a service. So if you see just 2 ads, the demand and the competition is probably pretty low. If you see 4 to 10 ads on the site, you know, if you include shopping ads and local service ads, you can see well over 10 ads sometimes on the search result page. That's a good indication that your competition is out there, but more importantly, your customers are out there, and the people doing the advertising, your competitors are really, you know, jockeying for position, trying to capture that demand out there. But it's a really quick and simple way to show if the demand is there or not. Google has its own tools to show kind of volume. You know, if you want to get a little more technical and have someone like me or really anyone on the panel can do some of these searches for you. There's some additional third-party tools like SEMrush and SpyFu, which get even more detailed with some of the cost estimates, potentially some of the return for search volume out there. But yeah, the easiest way is just to simply do a search. And if you see competitors out there, it's usually a good indication that they're spending money to make money with the ad.
Awesome. I mean, that's a great way to start today's conversation and to start your search as well. Very cool. Thank you so much. Lori, let's move to you next. What social media channels should businesses ultimately be on?
That's a great question, Will. We've got a lot of clients that come to us and ask, you know, oh, can you help me with my Facebook and making sure that we're getting found on Facebook? And the question I ask them in return is why Facebook? So when it comes to what channels businesses should be on in general, there is no specific answer, because really it kind of ties into the previous question where Jordan was chatting, and making sure that you're positioning yourself in the same place that your customers are. So you really want to make sure you understand your target customer and figure out where are they hanging out. You know, let's fish in the same pond that they are actually swimming in. So there is no specific answer as to where you should be. It's really understanding where your customer is and then make sure that you're positioned as the expert in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is why this is a marketing research webinar here today. No question. Very cool. Thank you, Lori. Carrie, how does social media and PR work together? What are kind of the ways in which they kind of blend?
Yeah, so I think it's important for just kind of set the foundation for what PR is, and its simplest definition is really just efforts to create a favorable public image, right, for your company. And you can do that either through earned media or owned or some paid efforts. Social media is kind of a unique place that, like Lori and Jordan said before me, fish, you know, where your customers are and be where they are. Social media, especially in the COVID age, but this was true before and it will be true after. It's got such an intense population and attention span now that most of your customers, no matter what you do, are going to be there. And so it's a channel that you own. And so if you are trying to use it for good, to create a favorable public image, and you have the ability to be proactive in that in front of folks that you consider to be prospects or customers, that's where PR and social media certainly comes in. It's very flexible, it's very powerful. You can keep it organic, you can certainly pay for it. And we've actually used social media to push out opportunities to gain attraction from actual other media journalists and whatnot. So it's amazing who's paying attention to what you post as a company. So it's the ability for you to set your own image. You can certainly pay to get in front of some folks like Jordan was talking about. And you can also plant some seeds, let's just say, so that folks that are in the earned media business, journalists and whatnot, also have the opportunity to pick up some interest and run a story perhaps, or at least reach out on additional information.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Awesome. Well, let's polish off round one of questions here with Howard. Howard, it's kind of a two-parter. You know, what are your thoughts on the range of branding projects, and with that, you know, what are the benefits of internal brand communications?
Yeah, that is a two-parter. The range is significant. I mean, when you get into the super large companies, I 500 million and under, something over 100 million, up to almost $100,000 to $250,000. That pretty much rounds out the range. The bigger ones are very deep. They'll employ all kinds of tactics. They'll do online research. They'll do focus groups. They'll go to online surveys. They'll work with any constituents that might be in your business, from stakeholders, I mean, all the way through to clients, past clients, that kind of thing, customers. They'll test the strategies that they come up with. Beyond that, if you wanted to get into the design aspect, they'd always have rules and regulations for how the logo and the tagline should be presented at all times, whether in all their permutations and variations, right down to the typeface, the color palette, all of that. But really, and it goes all the way down to somebody who owns like maybe a $20 million company or something like that, where the owner, the CEO, has kind of a vibe for it, and he knows what he wants to say, or he or she will say it, and there's the beginning of a branding. And so you've got this big range, depending on where you fall into. And what was the second part of the question?
Yeah, absolutely. So the second part here is kind of, what are the benefits of internal brand communications?
Right. Once the branding is set, there's an old saying, if you don't get it right inside, you won't get it right outside. And it really has to come alive inside. It needs an internal champion for sure. And it needs to be consistent throughout. So inside, people have to understand what it is that your story is, what value you have, and how it translates into benefits for your product or service. And then once you understand that, you can kind of, managers and so forth, and whatever they do internally, that, whether it's newsletters or any internal communications, can always bounce off of or come out of what that positioning is. And so one of the companies I did something for, I think it was, the tagline was "Upgrade the Experience." And so, of course, internally, the question always is, what have we done this week, today, to upgrade our customers' experience? And so that's just an example of how you can work it internally, but internally is important.
Yeah, absolutely. No question. Awesome. I have a question that I kind of want everyone to have an opportunity to have input on. Carrie, we'll start with you here. Why is research important to developing a marketing strategy?
How much time do we have, Will?
Yeah, not much there, Carrie, not much. So
I think the quick answer, kidding, of course, but the quick answer really is, we're always kind of biased by our own opinions, our own thoughts, and our own experiences. And oftentimes business owners and even marketing folks get trapped into thinking what they know to be true, what they think to be true, and what they do is what their customers think, want, and do as well. And so objectivity probably would be the number one thing, the number one reason I would give you, because you want to always be talking in terms of what's going to be attractive and of interest and of value to the customers, and not necessarily yourself.
Awesome. Lori, how would you piggyback off that?
Yeah, I think it's extremely important to really understand your customer, and you can't do that by making assumptions. You have to do the homework, do the research, get into their head as much as you possibly can to figure out what makes them tick. And like I said earlier, figure out where they're hanging out online, what kind of message is going to connect and resonate with them, who's influencing their buying decision. All of these elements are extremely important in order to make a solid strategy so that you are winning and you're getting in front of the people that you want to be getting in front of. You don't want to just speak to the masses. You want to be strategic in where your time and energy is going with your marketing campaigns.
Yeah, awesome. And I'll just attest to the fact that there is some sawing going on across the hall from us here at Keystone Click. So that is the vibrations you are feeling through the screen. Jordan, let's continue. I just want to make sure everyone, remembers exactly what that question is, which is, why is research important to developing a marketing strategy?
Yeah, I think both Carrie and Lori had great answers. And to Carrie's original point, how much time do you have? There's so many aspects and so many ways this can go for an answer. I'll stick with what I know. And from a paid marketing standpoint, research can really save you a ton of money. A lot of people get hung up that it costs money to do research. Well, that pales in comparison to the money that you could waste if you don't know who you're going after, what the message is, what the main KPIs you're going to look for after you launch something. So for me, the research really improves the ROI and the bottom line, because you can easily waste a lot of money without proper research.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Awesome. Howard, why don't you round out this portion for us here about ultimately why research is important to developing a marketing strategy?
Well, I'll make it four. I think client-centric is the best reason, or among the best reasons for doing the research. And I agree that there are a number of ways to answer that question. I'll just add to that, to what everybody else has said, is I like to understand there's a thing that we call business value and personal value. And I'd like to get at, through research, what is the business value? So in other words, what do you expect this company to do? Are you dotting the I's and crossing the T's on the quality? And are you generally there from a business standpoint? If you are, that's great, because then even more important, and it's hard to believe, but even more important than that is the intrinsic value, the emotional value. And that is, what's it like to do business with you? What does a win look like? How does our product or service and how we talk to you, and I guess, in what platform we talk to you, what works for you, so that we can kind of line up with your expectations of all of that. And I'd agree too with Jordan. I think that false starts can be very, very, very expensive.
Yeah, awesome. I tell you what, I have no doubt that we could continue down that path here for quite a while, but very insightful information. Thank you all for that. Let's move into just one last question that I have for you guys. And Jordan, we're going to come back to you, specifically related back to digital advertising. You've touched on it a couple of times. Can a business still run digital ads that drive new business if their website, ultimately isn't that great?
Yeah, and we run into this plenty. As I'm sure we all do, not everyone's website is amazing. Starting with ours. I mean, ours is 6 years old now, so it needs a refresh, and that just happens. That's just the business cycle. You come back to it; it needs updated, but you don't have to pause advertising. There's other ways to do things, and I'm not just talking about broadcast, TV or radio that trickles down business. It's harder to measure. I'm talking about actual measurable digital media. So Google has a pretty new ad format called local service ads, which drive phone calls or emails right to service businesses. So think of a construction contractor or a dentist, or even professional services like lawyers. If a customer does a search for one of those services, Google has kind of a top pack ad that just drives a phone call or drives a lead, which is pretty cool. They don't even go to your website. Facebook and LinkedIn have similar ad formats where you're actually just capturing the user's information. It goes into, to keep it easy, kind of an email that gets sent to the business and says, hey, this, Joe Smith is interested in your service or in your product. And that, again, doesn't even go to your website. So you can certainly drive legit phone calls and leads to your business just through Google, Facebook, and LinkedIn ad platforms. It's pretty amazing.
Awesome. Yeah, that's very cool. Very cool. And that's a Great feature, no question. Carrie, let's move to you here. What advice do you give business owners struggling to use social media for their business?
So yeah, that's another webinar in and of itself. So the first thing I would say is that the majority of our time, or let's say more than people would think, we play as a marketing consultant. We really play counselor. Like we really play a listening counselor session, right? We ask questions and wait for the answers. Most business owners don't spend time objectively looking at their business. They're trying to get in the business, and right, the day kind of owns them. So the first thing I would tell a business owner, and the first thing I do tell business owners is, you've got this. Exhale, take a breath. You got this. Some of the best social media content comes from just revisiting, and Will, I'll send you some article links. I've got some article links that maybe we can put in the show notes that really expands on this. But some of the best social media content you can come up with really is just revisiting and reverse engineering the sales process that you already get from your existing customers. So if you ever hear a question more than once, that's a fantastic way of getting content for social media. The reason most business owners struggle or are scared of or are afraid of, or whatever we want to use with social media, is because I think it's something you have to master as a different tactic, when in fact what's in their head is really their superpower. The experience, the answers, the value, the trust that they've earned from other customers really is the best path to showing value and experience and bringing new customers in. So that's the first thing I say, is you've got this. The second thing is, everything always seems easier when you write it down and make a plan. And again, I'll send you a link to, there's a very easy way of kind of structuring what you put out for social media. And just honestly, just taking a spreadsheet and dividing it up into categories like culture and commerce and community and you know, different reasons that you would be posting on social media can really help people get organized and attack one channel or multiple channels at a time. And the last thing I share is that don't think of this as just customers, right? So it's okay to put out customer stuff and sales questions and whatnot. That's a good use of social media. But also, we have many businesses that are struggling to find talented workforce and employees. And social media becomes an excellent place to showcase your mission, vision, values, and what it's like to work there. So you can position yourself a little bit as an employer of choice. And so a lot of people miss that piece when it comes to social media, because they're so focused on the customer that I always share with them, that's an excellent way for you to be putting out positive messages for potential employees to see who you are. So when openings or opportunities present themselves, it's a little easier to land the folks that you want working for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's some really good insight. And I hope people continue to look at all those different avenues in which they can use social media. That's awesome. Howard, back to the hot seat. Can you talk a little bit about the high-level integration of brand into communication strategy?
Yeah, it is pervasive. It is everywhere. It has to be. So once you have your position established and it's bought into at all levels, the first thing you have to do is have champions internally. And once you have that, then it's a little bit easier to work it into all of your strategies and all of your tactics. You need all of this, particularly the champions on both sides. So if you're the client side or the customer side, you have to have your product managers or the VPs or something like that. On the agency side, it has to be the account soup or the creative director, but somebody has to make sure that they're the champion of the positioning. And then every decision on every strategy and then unfolding tactic is does it add up to the brand, and does it make the brand come to life and give it a meaning? And so that is probably the key aspect of the integration of the brand, and it goes right through to decisions on all content. So whether it's if you're looking for subject experts, who do you get? The people have to be, certainly right about their expertise, but they also have to figure out how to, in the end, work it back into the brand. As Carrie might tell you too, in PR or events or any of that kind of thing, is there a way to tie the brand back into it? Or can you use the brand positioning to help you figure out what the content or the event should be? and can it just come right out of the positioning? So if you really live the positioning, it should help with the strategies and even the tactics.
Yeah, awesome. That makes sense. And Lori, let's kind of finish things out here in round 2 with a measurement question. You know, what are the best ways to actually measure if your digital channels are working?
Ooh, that was going to be a question for Jordan, I think, but that's okay. Yeah, you feel free to jump in here.
I can jump in if you want.
Yeah, but measuring your digital channels, I mean, at the end of the day, you have to define what it is that you're trying to achieve. So you don't want to, I know a lot of people just look at, oh, how many likes do I have on Facebook, or how many followers do I have on Instagram? But at the end of the day, you need to really figure out what is the goal, what is the end objective, and then kind of work backwards and say, let's identify what are the KPIs that are going to help us determine if we're on the right track, or do we need to make some intelligent decisions to make adjustments to the plan. So every initiative that you're taking is going to have different measurements that you're looking at. I don't know if you wanted to take a different spin on that, Jordan.
Yeah, I think that's super critical what you said. You know, one of my thoughts was more of an anecdotal take was, you know, we work with a lot of companies who've done advertising before, and sometimes they'll come to us and say, hey, can you take this over? Here's what our current agency is doing. This is what they're measuring. And we dig in and we find out they're only measuring online sales, for example. When we dig in to more of a discovery with the client, we find out, you know, 50% of their business actually comes from phone calls, and no one was measuring that before. So I think it really comes down to like, what's actually driving the bottom line for the business. You have to figure that out, step one, and then you come up with the tactics on how to actually measure that. Is that, can you get everything done with Google Analytics, or do you have to pull in some phone call tracking? Do you have to work with their CRM or their ERP to really understand what's actually driving the bottom line of the business? Because that's hypercritical to doing anything on the advertising PR front or brand front too.
Yeah, awesome. Good. Well, I'm glad we were able to tag team that one there. That was great. Awesome. Well, I tell you what, timing is just impeccable here, I'd like to say. So you guys are doing fantastic. So let's move in to kind of our Q&A section of today's panel discussion. We're going to start with a panelist internal Q&A, but I encourage those who are on today's discussion to also start thinking of any questions that you might have for our panelists. You can do it certainly one of two ways. You can leave kind of just a high level question out there that we can ask to the panel as a whole, or, you know, if you want to ask a question to a specific panelist, please just include that in the Q&A portion. So at this time, yeah, start thinking of some questions you might have. And Lori, why don't you go ahead and get us started on a question that you might have for another panelist.
Sounds good. All right, Howard, let's talk about, I know branding's your expertise. So talk about the differences in different types of branding projects. Because you hear branding and some people think it's just a logo, you know, and it's obviously a lot more than that.
It is. And we covered some of it a little bit earlier, but just to get specific, let's just say that you're dealing with, in this particular case, let's just say that you're dealing with a company that's maybe 100 million. And so they have some marketing chops. They do understand the value, but you're not going to be selling them a $200,000 program. But it still has to be more than just sitting down and having the CEO drum it up. So for example, one of the things one of the sets of things that I do for those kinds of companies is you really have to go in there and find out what the story is. What's the DNA of that company? Talk to all the other stakeholders. Talk to the chief salespeople, the regional people. Talk to present customers, and try to get at specifically what it is that it looks and feels like when it's working. So this isn't a typical SWOT analysis at all, because for this exercise, you don't care. What you really want to know is what what's working, what makes the company feel good when they deliver, what makes the customers or clients feel good when they're getting what they want, and keep them coming back. And then, you know, get all that down, look for the common threads, and develop then from there a positioning statement, kind of a core narrative, and messaging tactics. And from there, you can pretty much execute whatever it is you want to execute going forward, because it's your story and it's come out through all of those interviews. And it's really a good way to, it's not anecdotal. I mean, it's a nice balance between, you know, spending a whole lot of money and doing enough to try to get to the kind of the truth of the DNA.
So I got to follow up on that. And, you know, there's a lot of discussion around personal branding, especially because everyone's on social media right now due to COVID. Is there much of a difference in branding for a company versus personal branding?
Probably not. If you believe that there is a intrinsic benefit that differentiates you, whether you're just, it's a person, you have to be delivering a benefit, something that people want, and in a way that they want it. And you have to get to that story. I think you were asking if this was, earlier you were asking if this was a good time to do rebranding with COVID and all of that. And my position is absolutely, because branding isn't transactional. It's not situational. It's baked in. It's who you are. And if the client is ready to go and wants to, you know, go through this project, it's a great time to do it. People have a little bit more time to spend with you, and they're maybe a little more reflective now. And I think you can kind of help get to the story a little bit easier when you do that. So I think it's a good time. And to be specific, I don't believe there's too much of a difference between a brand of a product or a service and a person. Does that get to what you were?
Yeah, that was good. Thank you.
Yeah, very good. Howard, I have down here that you had a question for Carrie.
Yeah, because as I've seen, and Carrie knows, you know, Carrie, I'm sure you have clients that expect for you to put together a strategy and messaging content strategy and drive it through for them. And then maybe they'll take it and use it with other firms that they might use. Or I guess maybe you'd have, you know, you'd come into a situation where the part that you play on the team would be that they already have that, and then you need to take a look at it and look at and execute to what's been done. So how does that? What's the balance? I mean, do you see much of that?
So yes, so it's very rare that somebody comes in with a white clean slate and empty history and says, "We trust you. Here's all our money. Now do something great." Right? We've never done anything before. That would be ideal. That would be awesome. It doesn't happen because we work with humans. But to your point, in both scenarios, Howard, I think the most powerful question that I try to get our employees to ask, and I try to ask as much as possible, is why, right? So if something exists, I want to know why. I want them to be able to communicate to me why, whether it's a strategy, a tactic, or just the message themselves. I'm going to extend something that you said. I really want to try to understand the DNA of not only the message, but the business and the goal. And so I take them down a why trail, right? And then it has to actually ask why to the answer to the question. If it is something that we're doing that may get passed on, we certainly do come in as one. There's a growing trend over the last 3 or 4 years for there to be specialists rather than generalists come into bigger clients. So bigger clients are getting more familiar with being a general contractor and working with, let's say, 3 or 4 specialists in something, rather than just putting all their eggs in one basket. And so oftentimes we do have to work with teams that do different things and maybe even some similar things. And so it's our responsibility, probably even more so, to make sure that whatever we do is solid, so that it not only passes a straight face test when someone looks at it, but we're providing decent value. If we are getting something that comes in from somewhere else that we have to use, never discount the work that somebody else has done. There's always things to learn from previous exercises and previous people. But again, I think asking why and just understanding why something is, whether just to fulfill the understanding from our point of view or to see if they were really involved in the process to beginning. And again, to one of your points, I think one of the key components of any marketing, branding, public relations campaign is involvement and understanding from the client side, and not just relying on a vendor to do it for them. And so whether we create it or whether we inherit it, I think getting a deep understanding and digging into the why is an important element of success.
You know, I remember hearing, I'm familiar with the phrase, ask why 3 times and you get closer to the truth. Yeah. I thought that was kind of glib until I tried it. And I did it more than once. And if you're working with the right people, it's more than a glib sort of ask why 3 times. And in terms of really getting down to the truth. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, same. Hey, Will, can I ask a question of Jordan?
Yeah, absolutely. It is your turn.
So I've seen Jordan's work and I've seen some of the companies that he works with. So I know you've got some experience in this field. So I want to get your point of view because it's hitting us regionally here. We have seen, so you would be considered a digital specialist. You are doing digital campaigns and you do the companies, but there are, let's just call them media companies, right? Traditional companies, television, radio, newspaper, who find their traditional revenue changing or shrinking. And so they're struggling to stay alive, right? They're struggling to be relevant and provide value. Mm-hmm. And so they spin up new services. So it's not uncommon for us to see a television station become a digital marketing company, or a newspaper station want to do print or digital ads, or, you know, that kind of thing. Radio stations selling websites. Mm-hmm. Are you seeing the same thing as what I want to know? You're deeper into this than me. And how are you combating that when you come up against situations where people say, oh, I'm already doing it with XYZ, so I don't need it?
Yeah, definitely a big topic that's come out in the last 2 years and keeps getting more prevalent. I think as the companies learn that and educate themselves on quality, I think the media companies are going to have to prove themselves a little more. I think from what I've seen is they're entrenched with a company selling them radio or TV or print, and now they just bolt on this digital product. And it's not that easy. A low barrier to entry can be a really scary thing sometimes. People can spin up digital campaigns fairly easily, but to do it right is a pretty big gap, right? So anyone can log into a Google account, but to actually make it work really well and measure it and do the research ahead of time and to really make it work is on another level that's I would say a lot different than what I've seen with some of the media companies. And I can say that with the education of we've taken over accounts from media companies, and they typically have some pretty lax reporting, some pretty weird targeting that seem to benefit increasing their margins more than really actually increasing sales for the clients. So that's a bit of what I've seen. I think you just have to be leery and just ask the right questions as a customer or as a business owner, or as a marketing person in a business. You know, ask for the full transparent metrics, ask for the true cost of running those ads, because what we've seen with a lot of the media company is just a lot of bloat, a lot of markup, and not a ton of transparent performance. So kind of a negative subject, but it's out there and it's a reality of the advertising space right now. And yeah, when I see them do websites and stuff too, I kind of cringe.
Can I jump in, Will? So if I can add to that, I would say that there are two ways that carry two that I think we were poking at. There are really two ways to, if you're going to be able to circumvent it at all, there are two things that I think you should consider owning, or anybody. Own the relationship and own the idea. And if you own both of those and you don't have the competency in-house, you can get a partner or something. But if you own the relationship and you own the big idea, And then other people come in out of nowhere and they'll say, well, I can do this or that. It just looks like one-offs. But if you own the relationship and you own the big idea, then I think you have a fighting chance to, you know, to marshal the whole project.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for definitely jumping in there, Howard. All right, Jordan, wrap it up for us. Anything top of mind that you'd like Lori to polish off?
Yeah, I mean, I was a little hard on myself with my website, but I know the way that I wouldn't go, which is kind of the Wix or the Squarespace of the world. And Lori, as more of a, you know, deeply entrenched website expert than me, I guess, what are your thoughts on those kind of do-it-yourself sites that you can spin up in a day, quote unquote?
Oh, I'll just use my own analogy of when I started my company, I did my bookkeeping by myself. I mean, I could, but was I doing it right? No. I was spending a ridiculous amount of time trying to figure it out and learn how to do it, and then eventually hired someone to do it for me and realized all the things I was doing wrong. So I think when you look at DIY websites, yeah, you can do it, but are you doing it right? And you know, the whole premise of today's webinar was research and strategy, and I think that's what's really important, is to make sure that you're providing the user experience that's in alignment with what your target customer is expecting. So they have certain expectations based on, you know, what level of education they have and other sites that they're engaging with. They're looking for a very specific message in a certain location on the site. So oftentimes, what I see on these DIY websites is just throwing out whatever they think needs to be said, which is often the wrong message or too much or too little information and in the wrong location. So having a plan and putting some strategy behind the architecture of the site, the visuals, the color palette, where the call to action is positioned, how many call to actions on a page. And then also, and that's just the user experience side of things. Then you have to look at the technical side. You know, some of these sites can be search engine friendly, but even then you need expertise and know-how to put in the right words in the right locations. Are you naming the images the right way? Are you using the tools the right way at the end of the day? So, you know, I hire a bookkeeper to manage my books because that's not my expertise. So I could do it on my own, but I'm likely going to do it wrong.
That's great. I think a lot of it has to do with control and how good you want the product to be at the end of the day. And it seems like some of those out of the box things are just not customizable enough, not user friendly enough, right?
Yeah, you're working within a box, and it's quite obvious when you've got a templated site with stock photography, which I would 100%, if you can avoid using stock photography on your site, don't use it. I know Google's actually starting to look at that from a negative standpoint as well.
Awesome. Great question, Jordan. Yeah, great question. All the way around, honestly, truly, all the way around, our conversation has been just outstanding so far. Let's take just 6 minutes here. I'm going to throw just a couple of brain busters your guys' way, to no one specifically. So please, you know, take your time, pick one, you know, someone start our answer, and then you guys feel free to please just piggyback off each other. I have no doubt that all 4 of you have experienced this before, where it's, you know, it's a combination of, you know, a client not either, you know, really wanting to follow your advice, or, you know, they don't have the time to conduct the research. They don't have they can't afford maybe the investment of the entire strategy, right? So what are kind of some things that you guys recommend to your clients or to your prospects to get started when they come to you with those types of issues?
Time and money is always a challenge. I think it's smart to do it right the first time, instead of, you know, there's a number of clients that or individuals we've talked to where they just want to get something going right now, but they don't want to invest in doing the research. So as Jordan alluded to earlier, you're just going to be throwing money away at that point. So why not invest the time in doing it right the first time? It is going to be a longer plan and process, but at the end of the day, if you're running a business, this is a long game altogether. You're not just throwing a business up for a couple weeks and then shutting it down. I mean, you want to invest the time in doing it right.
And to piggyback on that, you said invest the time to do it right. I think an important thing for us as agencies and consultants to put out there to our clients is a timeline, and that really instills some trust of our experience and holds us both accountable to saying, give us this amount of time for research, give us this amount of time for initial reaction, give us this for a pivot, give us this for results. That just makes everybody feel a lot better and makes them understand what they're actually going to get out of this process and the benefit of actually following this along.
I'll add another aspect, and it might seem somewhat jarring, but to me it's a very critical question, and that is, well, if I understood the entirety of the question, is part of it was there enough money to do this right, and time, and so the money part of it and the time part of it is a right up front a major fork in the road. Now, if you want to keep a client for years, then you have to really understand the importance of how to answer that question. If they don't have it, but you think they're going to have it, maybe you, as the agency, invests a little bit in to get off on the right foot, or frankly, the jarring part is if it's not there, it is your company, your brand. You may have to fire a client because if you get 1, 2, 3 of those in a year, and it goes down the wrong path and it ends up exactly where you know it's going to end up because it didn't start out right, that's something you need to decide about how you want to run your company and your relationships with your clients and, frankly, in the business community.
And I'll close taking a slightly different angle. And I know that in B2B, this is probably more true than traditional consumer facing, but we understand that not everybody's ready all the time. And we use this as a lead generation opportunity, and we refer to our clients as well. There are things that clients can do. There are things that businesses can do on their own. And if we've been there and we can share knowledge to allow people to borrow from what we've known and what we've done to kind of do it on their own, that's an introduction to how we think and how we do. So we actually use our blog for that. We have a considerable amount of kind of how-tos and pro tips, if you will, because we do want people to kind of digest things that we can share, that we don't have to own all the time. So we reverse engineer our own experiences and our own tips and put them into shareable nuggets that people can use. And for us, and for B2B in general, because the sale is typically a longer form, when somebody becomes more comfortable in what you're providing them for free, they're more likely to pay for additional value because they can see kind of some of the thought processes and how they align with their own companies at the beginning.
Now that is how a panel answers a question. That's what I'm talking about right there. That was great. All right, last one. We're going to finish this here. We're talking about measurement. I have no doubt that each of you individually have different KPIs, but I'm sure you all have similar KPIs. So let's finish our conversation here today with, just your kind of how you guys, what KPIs represent to you, and, maybe just highlight 1 or 2 KPIs that, you consider to be important to the work that you guys do.
I'll just jump in. I mean, for us, it's all data driven. So we try to measure absolutely everything. A lot of that has to do with website traffic, media spend, and the results that come from that. It's a really small box that I live in, and it's mostly all measurable. So I'm really spoiled with having KPIs around that stuff. I think some of these other guys have some harder to measure things. So I'm interested in the answer.
From my standpoint, from the consultancy service end of it, I would say the most critical part of it is to make sure that you and the client are absolutely agreed upon what it is in its total clarity and the tactics that you're going to use to get there. And if you can show that you did the tactics properly, that the KPIs would be following. A lot of times that nobody has the desire or the money or the time to follow up on research to see if you actually hit what you thought you were going to hit. So the next best thing is to make sure that you're all on the same page. Everybody agrees with what you're going to do, and then you do it. And if it's a good experience and it seems to have gone well, that experience is enough to carry you on to the next project. They used to say, if you're selling and you can get the person to nod, you just keep going down that road. As long as they're nodding, you're in a good place. Not nodding off, by the way.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And the second habit is my favorite habit, which I talk about often. Will knows this. It's begin with the end in mind. So again, what are the goals that we're trying to achieve? And then you kind of reverse engineer how you're getting there. And each, tactic that you're implementing, there's some sort of element that you can measure so that you can, turn the knobs, pull the levers to make adjustments to help you ultimately achieve that goal that you're trying to achieve. So not giving you a specific, but just kind of big picture approach to my philosophy on KPI as well.
I'll close with a different angle as well from a business point of view. KPIs are client, they'll change with every client and every project. For the company, for my company, relationships is what we have with clients. That's what we value. A KPI for me with a client, and it's the same for other businesses, financial advisors and service businesses and whatnot. If the client is comfortable in asking you questions on things outside of the scope that you're working on, right? If they trust you, if they trust that they have a relationship with you to actually ask you, hey, do you know anybody, or do you know how I can, outside of the scope of where we're going, if we can get them to believe in us as solution providers, even outside of the scope of the project that we're in, for me, that's a valuable KPI in the relationship business, and it's something that we look for.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, I tell you what, thank you guys so much for your time today. The insight is incredible. I have no doubt that there's, a lot of value packed in here. Just one more time for those of you at home, Carrie Weston, President of Sutherland Weston Marketing and Communications, Jordan Meyer, Founder and CEO of Granular, 𝗷𝗫𝗄𝗃, owner of 𝗏𝗏𝗃 Branding and Creative, and lastly, Lori Hybe, the President of Keystone Click. Lori, Carrie, Jordan, Howard, thanks so much for your guys' time today.
All right, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Perfect. Well, for you at home, thank you for joining us. Please continue to tune in to our webinars. We will be sure to post this online soon. Keystone Click /webinars. Thanks, everyone. Have an awesome day.
Thank you.
See ya.
Have a good day.
Bye.